Hello everyone and welcome back to my Mythic Dungeons tutorial part 3. In this tutorial I'm going to be covering a little bit more of the basic mechanics in dungeons. More specifically, we're going to be looking at dungeon keys, mob spawning, loot and door keys, or item keys rather, and even the first initial setup of loot systems. So if you haven't watched my last tutorial, the last one pretty much covered progression, starting your dungeon, progressing through it, how to set up a couple basic triggers, and finishing your dungeon. So if you haven't checked that out, please make sure to go back and do so if you are uncertain about anything. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and move forward with this one. So we left off with finishing dungeons. And in this one, I want to cover some special mechanics, which are going to be dungeon keys. Now, one thing I want to make sure you all are aware of off the bat, if you are a server admin or a server developer, do not make your keys craftable. There's a reason I say this. So, say I have a diamond sword here, and say I'm going to make a diamond sword. Well, the big reason being is Minecraft has internal data on each item just by default, so there's a hidden tag inside of it that tells it whether or not it was crafted. And Mythic Dungeons will copy your items literally data byte by data byte, so it will know down to the very T of whether or not the item will match. For example, we're going to type md add key my first dungeon. This is the diamond sword that we spawned in. This is the diamond sword that we crafted. We'll keep them separate like that. And now let's go ahead and type md play my first dungeon. As you can see, it took our dungeon key and we're left with this other one. Okay, let's go ahead and finish. Now if we try to play it again, well, it worked that time, but usually it doesn't. Sometimes I guess it will, occasionally. However, if you ever come across the frustration of why is it not letting me enter the dungeon, I have a dungeon key, I crafted it, that's usually why. Crafted items are counted differently than spawned in items, so I usually recommend just not making dungeon keys be craftable. To get rid of it, you're going to type md remove key my first dungeon, and make sure you have your dungeon item in hand whenever you type it, otherwise it will say something along the lines of this: you aren't holding anything in your hand. Or it'll say something like you aren't holding the dungeon key, something or other. Essentially, you'll get a warning. But that covers dungeon keys. Let's go ahead and take a look at mob spawning. So we're going to type md edit my first dungeon. Okay. We're going to go ahead and fly over, and we're going to use, we'll use netherrack, or, no, we'll use red nether bricks. These look pretty menacing. So you'll generally want to put them one block up from the ground. It's kind of funky sometimes. Sometimes they'll spawn in just weird Y locations. But we're going to type, or click on location functions, and then mob spawner. And as you can see, it says supports mythic mobs. Next, we're just going to do a player detector, just to keep it simple. Now we can go ahead and break this block. The thing will still stay here. If you ever want to get rid of it, make sure you just put a block back and then pull out your function tool. But for the time being, we're going to break it, and we're going to take a look at the options here. So you have your player detector trigger, again, distance, minimum players for each player, for party, yada yada, allow retrigger. But let's look at the actual function. So you have mob name. Here you can type in your mythic mob name. If you've seen any of my tutorials, you know my common one is damage dummy. Use it for literally anything and everything. And it'll change the hologram name to the name of the mob spawner. Let's go ahead and just change it back to zombie though. Okay. Next is your mythic mob level, if that applies to your mobs. If you don't know much about mob levels, I recommend watching my tutorial on it. It covers pretty much how much damage, health, whatever attribute you decide to buff per mob level. By default, all mobs will be level 0. So if your mobs do not have levels or you're using vanilla mobs, you do not have to worry about the mob level option. Here, you can type the amount. We'll go ahead and make it 2. Next, you have your spawn delay, how long it takes in ticks from your trigger to spawn in whatever mob you are spawning. Initially, it'll spawn them in immediately. However, you can make it last or wait 1 second before spawning if you so choose. And then after, you have your spawn interval. So we know we need to spawn 2 zombies, but the interval is going to be the delay between spawns. So if we set it to 40, which is going to be 2 seconds, it does count it in ticks. How long should the delay between spawns be in ticks? 20 ticks per second, so 2 seconds. So it'll spawn a zombie, wait it'll wait 2 seconds, and then it'll spawn the next zombie. The last option for this is going to be mob direction. This is basically asking you which direction you want your mob to be facing whenever it spawns in, assuming the players are coming... Assuming the players are coming from dead ahead, we're going to face that direction, and we are going to right-click. Now, it doesn't matter where you're standing. As you can see, it's still going to be the same. It's entirely based on what pitch you are looking at. But for now, we're just going to set it to there. Okay, and that's all there is for mob spawning. So let's go ahead and MD save, MD leave, MD leave. I'm going to give myself a weapon, netherite, sword, 1, and then we're going to go ahead and play again. Okay. So now, whenever we walk near that block... Oh, geez. As you can see, it spawned a zombie variant, waited 2 seconds, spawned another one. The fact that it spawned a baby zombie was just very unfortunate. That's just a vanilla Minecraft mechanic that zombies can spawn in instead as baby zombies. It's dumb, but keep that in mind if you decide to use vanilla mobs. It's not very common, but it does happen, as you can tell. But that's mob spawning right there. Next thing I want to cover are going to be door keys or loot keys. Basically just keys, but for a different purpose than entering a dungeon. So let's go ahead and just leave real quick. And we're going to go back into edit my first dungeon. And now, say we want to have loot. We'll do this. And then we'll do maybe a stripped oak, because I just kind of like the way it looks. Okay, so we'll have our loot over here. This will be our key spawner, and this will be our actual loot. Let's look at the key spawner first. So we're going to click on it with our feather, and we're going to type player functions, key dispenser. You can do based on different things. If you decide to use other triggers, I believe it'll kind of make the key just fall at the location, but if you do based on right click, it'll just give whoever right clicks it the key. We'll just do player detector for now, or no, we'll just do right click for now because it's easier. And here you can see how it works. So even though you have different functions, they do still operate a little bit differently based on what they do, but you can change here. So right now it's going to be dropped at this location, or if we right click it, it'll just straight up give us the key. I think depending on how you do it, if you decide to do right click, I think you're better off just having it be given to the player. But if it's like a player detector like this one, maybe just dropping it will be a better way to go about it. It's really up to you. I don't think there's no right or wrong way. So it's really just your preference. Now let's talk about the key item. By default, they throw in a tripwire hook here named dungeon key. You don't have to do anything special to it if you don't want to. You can use this if you want, if you so choose. If you want to use a custom item, say, I don't know. Let me do emerald name test. One. Sorry, there's one name test. There we go. Okay. So say we want to use this item named test. All we're going to do is we're going to click it. We're just going to drag it into that spot. The dungeon key is just going to chill in our inventory. That's fine. Let's go ahead and grab another emerald real quick with that command. And now that we have that set, we're actually going to go over here. We are going to do player functions, loot table, and key item detector. This is going to trigger whenever the block is right-clicked with an item. And there's a few different ways you can change it up if you so choose. We'll cover them a little bit here. First, this is going to determine whether or not it gives it to the player or it gives it to the party. By default, it gives it to the party. You can change that, of course, if you want to. First, let's go ahead and look at the key item because this is going to be the important part. So we need to get our key here now that we're in this inventory. Choose item, and we're going to throw in our emerald there. So this emerald is going to drop from over there, and we're going to use it over here to get our loot. Next, you can make it to where it consumes the item. That's entirely up to you if you want to. If you have it set to consume, it means it'll use the emerald, and that emerald will be taken from your inventory. If not, it'll remain in your inventory, and you'll just be able to hold on to it. I don't generally recommend it not consuming. I think it's better that you lose your key whenever you use a loot chest, but again, that is entirely up to you. Here, you can also change how it's used. If you have it set to where it can be used anywhere, I could right-click all the way over here and still acquire the loot. However, if you have it set to default, you have to right-click the block itself in order to acquire the loot. I don't see a lot of good uses for this, personally. However, it's up to your creativity, and the option is very much there. Let's go ahead and back it up just a little bit. Now that we have our key set and how we want our key to operate, now we can actually change what we acquire out of it. So here you have experience that you can get. This is going to be a number between 1 and 99, and that'll just be the individual experience that you earn on your experience bar. Here you have experience levels, which is just the entire level itself instead of the individual experience, because as you know in Minecraft, the more experience levels you have, the more experience you need to get the next level. So here you can just give levels altogether if you so choose to. Let's talk about loot for just a second here. So current loot table, as you can see, there's none, and we'll type in here my first loot. Okay, so normally I might have forgotten to delete it, but normally it'll tell you there's no loot table of this name. It'll say click here to create loot table. Since I forgot to delete the loot table, I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. MD loot, remove my first loot. And now let's go ahead and do that again real quick. So we're going to type it in, my first loot. There we go. So this is what you'll see initially if your current loot table does not exist. So before we click on that, let's go ahead and just grab an item real quick. We'll say a netherite sword. Okay, now we'll click on the message, and we'll drag our netherite sword into there. There's a couple of different options that you can see up top. One is minimum items. This is the absolute minimum amount. So say we had like 2 full bars here filled with items. This will be the least amount that we can roll. This will be the most amount that we can roll. The minimum can never pass the maximum, and the maximum can never go under the minimum. So you can make it to where you'll never acquire anything. You can make it to where you have a chance to acquire something by having a minimum of 0, and a maximum of however many, meaning there's always a chance you won't get any loot, but there's a chance you will still get some. Or if you want it to be guaranteed, set your maximum to however many items you have in here, and set your minimum to your maximum. Next and last in this is going to be duplicate items. So say I have different stacks of items like this. Let's go ahead and edit our loot. MD loot edit my first loot. Say you have that there. Oops, let's back it up. That there. That there. That there. Again, I'm trying not to put them all in at once. If you have something like this and you have duplicate allow, then there's a chance that you could roll both of those emeralds. Okay, now let's go ahead and get rid of these, and let's talk about the individual here. So here you can see one of one items. Here you can set the minimum of that item, the maximum of that item, and the weight of that item. We'll go over this a little bit more as we do another tutorial, because there's a lot more loot detail than what you see here, and I want to kind of get through the rest of this. So here we have our loot, which we are going to guarantee that we get another sword out of. Okay, so that's done. Let's go ahead and MD save, MD leave, and then MD play. Okay. So now, when we right click on this block, we're going to get our key, which, as you can see, test. Again, if you remember in my previous tutorial, I told you I forgot to update the placeholder. It will not normally say $1. It'll usually say the player name. I just need to update my placeholder plugin. But now if we take this key over here and we right click the block with it, here's our loot table with our netherite sword. I think it just places it in a random slot. I don't really know how the placement works, but I believe it's just random. And it even says you got 2 experience levels. Okay, that's cool. Let's go ahead and leave. Now what else can you do with keys though? Well, let me show you. We're gonna go ahead and MD edit my first dungeon. Say you want to up the ante on how this may work. Say you can choose between getting loot, or you can choose to go into an even harder area of the dungeon, which might be incredibly challenging. Maybe it's a puzzle. I don't know, that's entirely up to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to right click this. We're going to location functions, door controller, player triggers, key item detector. Scroll to your sticky piston and right click. Scroll to the item frame, choose item, right click. Actually, don't right click yet. We need to acquire that emerald again. Let's scroll up through our commands. Okay. So now we have our emerald named test. So we're going to put that in there. Okay. Let's back out, back. And we're going to save again. MD play my first dungeon. Sorry, we need to leave first, of course. MD leave. Now MD play my first dungeon. Okay. So we have our key, and now you can give your players an option. Do you want them to be able to just pull loot out of this loot box here, or do you want to give them the option for a challenge and carry on further? Because we know, based on what we decided to set for this tutorial anyway, that we can only use it on one or the other before the key is gone. So if we right click this door, key is gone, we can no longer claim our loot, but now we have access to a new area. That's just an idea of something that you can do with keys. You can make it to where you have to get a key to move on to a certain area. You can make situational keys like that. It's entirely up to you. There is no limit on what you can do. Just make sure you pay attention to the options, such as consume on use, the specific key material and name and NBT or anything else of that nature. And well, you know, just let your imagination go wild. There's a billion different things that you can do with it. So that was pretty much all I really wanted to cover in this tutorial. Just a few things. As you can see, these do get kind of lengthy, so I'm going to try to keep them segmented the best I can. I appreciate all of you who decided to stick around and watch. In my next tutorial, I'm actually going to go into loot a little bit more in depth, but on this one I kind of wanted to just throw some more dungeon progression at you, so that way you can at least have the basic understanding of how these dungeons will operate. If this video helped you out or inspired you, please make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up, so that way we can help get this video on the homepage of other YouTubers and other Minecrafters, so that way other people will be able to see the help that they can get with this plugin. You know, help me, help them if you would be so kind. Otherwise, thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see what you come up with in the future.